Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Todd Mapes, and I'm the Vice President of Business Development at AltaPro Insurance. And I'm extremely pleased to bring you this webinar on a topic, that seems to grow in relevance almost every day, and that being the 10 things every lawyer needs to know about cyber liability. It seems like more and more we read where someone's getting hacked, phished, socially engineered, scammed, you name it. At the end of the day, we all know the bad guys are out there, and unfortunately, they are proving to be very effective. So this webinar is designed to help raise your awareness on some of the things that you can do to prepare and protect yourselves against these threats, and what you can do when they happen. Our featured speakers today are Kevin O'Hagan and Jamey Davidson of O'Hagan Meyer Attorneys and Advisors. Now, many of you may already know Kevin and Jamey and know that they are recognized throughout the legal industry as two of the leading experts in the area of cyber liability. We are extremely pleased they've made themselves available to you and to us today. And hosting the session is AltaPro's very own risk pro, Jay Reeves. Jay is the former VP of Risk Management at North Carolina Lawyers Mutual and is the current owner of yourlawlife.com, which is a website dedicated to helping lawyers achieve and maintain work-life balance. So the session today, we think is going to be a little different, and we hope a little better than most of the webinars that you may have attended in the past. As you can see, we're using video here, and we're going to take an interview format with Jay, the risk pro, asking Kevin and Jamey relevant questions around what you need to know about cybersecurity and liability. Now, most of you already are familiar with the AltaPro Insurance, and as you know, we're an MGA who, through our agency partners, have for over 15 years been providing professional liability insurance to lawyers and other professionals. We've recently launched our risk purchasing group, which, if you're not already familiar with it, is a service designed to benefit our insureds, specifically lawyers, in a variety of ways. For example, with the free CLE webinar that you're attending today. The site is specifically designed to help lawyers run their practices better, and as an AltaPro insured, you actually already have access to the site. So if you haven't already, go out and check it out. All right, before we get started, a little housekeeping. First of all, you should all be seeing the main content on the large part of your screen and the video film strip on the right-hand side of your screen. You do have an option up at the top of your screen called View Options. You can drop that down, and there's some things you can do there to fit to the window if it's not fit or if it's full screen or whatever you want to do there. But it should be pretty set as you see it right now. To download content, click on the link provided in the chat message you all just received. You can also download the content at the address on the screen that you see there. Most importantly, by attending this webinar, you're going to receive 1 hour of CLE credit. However, to receive credit, we must be able to verify your participation. So at various intervals throughout the webinar, you're going to be prompted electronically asking if you're still watching the webinar. I suggest you click the yes button when you see that. All right. Additionally, you'll be required to complete a survey at the end of the webinar. The survey will require you to enter 2 separate codes, one given at the beginning of this session and one given at the end. The beginning code is being provided now. Write it down and enter it in the survey at the conclusion. In addition to that, we'll send you the survey, in a separate email, just in case if you can't get to it at the end of the webinar. And if you're participating by phone only, please contact us at info@altaprorpg.com to receive a form that you'll need to fill out and receive your credit. So this is going to be a very interactive webinar. So if you want to ask questions, just click on the chat or the Q&A tabs at the bottom of the screen. Now, that said, due to time constraints, we're not going to be able to get to all of them live. So we're going to record all the questions, answer them all, and then send the document response back to you in a separate email. We also plan to do a little polling throughout the session, so keep an eye out for that and respond accordingly. So that's it. But without any further ado, I'd like to turn the session over to the AltaPro Risk Pro, Jay Reeves. Jay, take it away.
Thank you so much, Todd. Good afternoon, everybody. I am broadcasting from Chapel Hill, North Carolina. We call it Blue Heaven, but we're a little biased. I'm delighted to be here with you. Before Todd leaves us, actually, he just blacked out. There's a couple of things I have to say about Todd. The first thing is this webinar wouldn't be happening without Todd. There's a million little details that go into planning something like this. And Todd was the guy who kept the ship sailing in the right direction. So thank you so much, Todd. Todd's also one of the principal builders of what I think is one of the best risk management programs for lawyers in this country. And that's the AltaPro Risk Purchasing Group, which Todd referred to earlier. This webinar is just one of the offerings, and we'll have lots more stuff. Please visit our website and learn more about the access you have to success tools, and you get it just when you're insured through AltaPro. You may have already downloaded your manuscript. It's called 10 Things Every Lawyer Needs to Know About Cybersecurity. But if you haven't, don't worry about it. You can do it after the program. We're not going to go line by line through the manuscript. Instead, we're going to talk about some of the general principles and really what's happening down on the ground when it comes to cybersecurity for lawyers. And to guide us through that discussion, we're really lucky to have two of the top experts in defense malpractice for lawyers, cybersecurity, risk management issues. They are truly the experts, and you know they're experts because they're the ones wearing the coats and ties. Todd and me, I'm wearing Carolina blue, but no coat and tie because I'm not an expert. So I'm delighted to have Kevin O'Hagan, Jamey Davidson on our program today. Thank you, gentlemen, for showing up.
Thanks for having us, Todd and Jay.
So let's dive right in. We've talked in planning this program about some of the core principles, some of the essential things you got to have in your mind when it comes to cybersecurity. And number one is to be aware. By that, we mean even as I'm standing here talking, you need to be aware of the threat or the risk that's affecting your law practice. So let's kick things off by turning to our audience. Todd mentioned this is an interactive webinar, so here are a couple of questions to gauge your level of awareness. And so take a moment and fill out that. And while we're waiting for the results to come in, let me pose this just to Kevin and Jamey in general. I know you guys don't just represent lawyers. You work with Fortune 500 companies, all sorts of different businesses on cybersecurity. But are lawyers an especially vulnerable and tempting target? And if so, why is that the case?
Well, Jay, I mean, to be truthful, just about anybody who runs a business is a target at this point. But law firms are particularly vulnerable. And that's if you follow cybercrime like Jamey and I have been doing for the past 15 years. And again, we've handled probably over 1,000 separate cyber incidents of all shapes and sizes. And particularly for law firms, very many for law firms, is if you follow the money. If you follow the money, you will find that law firms are a direct target of cybercrime. For instance, you've got various levels and ways that a law firm handles money and is a target for money. Again, cyber criminals aren't really interested in vandalism. They're interested in money, just like anyone else. And so if they can get inside of a law firm somehow, through the network, through either ransomware is one example, or they can get in through social engineering and break into your systems and get inside of a transaction and get you to wire money off. There's multiple scenarios by which an attorney has money and in control of it by virtue of their fiduciary relationships with their clients and access to trust accounts and so forth that make a law firm a particularly enticing target for the cybercrime. And Jamey can give you a little more details on some of those types of claims that we're seeing and what we're seeing prevalent right now and what's going on in the current environment.
Yeah, so some of the 3 or 4 most prevalent types of claims we're seeing that affect not only the 250 lawyer law firms, but the 1 lawyer, the 2 lawyer law firms. Kevin mentioned ransomware attacks. A lot of people think of that as paying a $2,500 or a $5,000 ransom to get your data back. That's actually not what we're seeing. Some of the new variants of ransomware attacks are able to exfiltrate in addition to encrypt data. So what happens, you open up your computer and you see a message saying everything's locked. You can't access any of your files or your client data. and you have to go about remediating that, which includes hiring counsel, hiring forensic experts to help you decrypt the data, and understanding what your backups are like. We see a lot of what we call social engineering, fraudulent funds transfer loss. I'll get a fake email, owner of my firm, Kevin O'Hagan, saying, send me this money, pay this vendor invoice. Where if you actually look at the email address, it may say Kevin O'Hagan, but it's O'Hagan Meyer. It's got one letter spelled wrong. And so especially for some small firms that do a lot of real estate transactions, last minute wire instruction changes are what we see a lot of, and especially to smaller firms that specialize in real estate transactions.
That's
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Jay.
no. I was saying that's great stuff. And the 1,000 sort of claims and cases you've seen gives you really a behind the scenes insight. I just thought we could look at the first results of the poll here. First question, have you or someone you know experienced a data breach? We got 60% saying yes, roughly, 41% no. Kevin, I've heard you say, whatever the number is, it's 100% probability that the bad guys are trying to break into your law firm at some point. So,
oh, for sure. Okay, so because law firms are particularly, unfortunately, have been a relatively easy target, and again, it's the control of funds and also the loose organization that many law firms, particularly small law firms, have. Cyber criminals are going to try to assault your firm in some fashion. Jamey just gave you a couple of examples. They can come in through ransomware. They can come in, so they lock down your system, and we've had instances where not only they lock down your system, but they lock up your backup. So now consider that in the realm of COVID-19 right now. We're all law firms, my law firm, Jamey's, everyone's, is operating in a virtual environment. To lock down all your systems right now would cause a tremendous business interruption. So I linked to Clink to log in and provide credentials to get into some documents that have been sent to you. Pick up the phone and call them and say, just want to make sure you sent me this email. I know it sounds completely absurd to have to always do that, but unless you're absolutely certain, if there's any, just having some amount of checking on the credibility of that email, if there's any doubt in your mind, then pick up the phone, call the other side, because all it would take is in some instances, just clicking on the link. Mm-hmm. In other instances, they'll ask you to put in information that you otherwise wouldn't share.
Kevin, I don't think that's crazy advice. It happened in North Carolina to our state bar. Every lawyer got an email purportedly from the state bar that looked legit, but asked for some questions that the bar had never asked for in the past. And a few lawyers picked up the phone and called the bar and said, did you send this letter? And that's how it got stopped. And luckily it was stopped pretty quickly.
Yeah, a few more that we have is that Kevin already kind of alluded to it, is have your IT explain your backup procedures. And one of the biggest things we see with some of the ransomware attacks is that the backup is so tied to the main system that it becomes encrypted as well. And then paying an exorbitant ransom is the only way to potentially get your client's data back. So kind of put your IT to the task before an event happens and say, look, how are you backing up my data? How is that being accomplished?
Yeah, and one key question, because I went through this with our IT even, is when you're talking about those backups, having a backup that's just continually backing up in real time at all times is just the kind of backup in many ways that a hacker's software can then link into, and then it encrypts the rest of it every time there's a backup being done. Make sure that there is a backup that is completely separate, that's done at periodic time frames, okay? And that there's multiple copies of that, so that let's say you had a backup at midnight every night. Well, you might want to also have a backup at 5 p.m. or something like that. But then all of those are saved for a certain amount of time, because if they can encrypt maybe the immediate backup, the last one, well, okay, maybe there's some emails and things you can't get access to, but at least if you can do it maybe 6 hours before that, or an 8-hour backup that's separate, we can at least get you up and running with, obviously some problems, but at least have some backup that is usable for the next day's activities.
Kevin, I find it interesting. I'm sorry, Jamie, looks like I stepped
Nope.
on you there, but
No, you did not at all. Not at
I
all.
find it, thank you. I find it interesting that you said some steps we could be taking for risk management for safety, they might be risky in themselves. There may be some backup programs and some software that we think we're using that helps us, makes us safe. So you really got to know what's going on here. That's one message I'm getting. You got to know what's going on here.
I think to Jamie's point though, the very just question to the IT person of how does the backup work, and do you think, IT person, that we're vulnerable to the backup being encrypted? Just those two questions should be enough to put your IT person, whether it's just a local IT jock that happens to be, around the corner, or your brother-in-law, or if it's a, gigantic IT firm, or if you even have an internal person. Just those two questions alone should be enough to help start to protect you from a complete encryption of everything going on at your law firm.
That's great.
Yeah, I think some of the biggest things here at the end, especially now that so many people are working remotely, you can see that I'm in my home office. Multi-factor identification when you're remoting in. So if some of you don't know what that is that when you enter your remote access through either email or your remote desktop, you actually get an alert to your mobile phone, and it makes you click on that, yes, it's you who's trying to get into your system. So multi-factor identification, a password policy. Passwords can only make your IT have a reset every 30 days. And then also understand the policies of the companies that share or host your data, because it's still your data, it's still your client's data, and if it's in the cloud or someone else is hosting it for you, you have to understand what their policies are for, because you can't just pass the blame on to that third party in most instances. You have to understand what they're doing, and that's why reputable companies and understanding what their policies and procedures are is extremely important. And then have a laptop and a mobile device policy, and then if you're going to issue those kind of company laptops, what kind of personal use are you going to allow? Are you going to allow someone to just search the internet all they want, or are you going to limit that in certain ways? These are all things that are becoming even more prevalent at this time, while so many people are working remotely and from home.
I can't stress enough, though, to the listeners, the multi-factor authentication. Okay, honestly, if there's one thing you take away from this seminar, is check to see if that's something that's available to you. It works. The reason it works is if someone does get into your system, when they try to log in or finds out login credentials, if they try to log in, it'll call your cell phone. So for instance, Outlook 365, which many of you I presume have and are using, or other email systems, even Gmail and others, have that. And so if somebody tries to use anyone else's in the firm's authentication credentials from an unknown device, okay, it will call your cell phone, and you just have to verify that it's you. I'm sure you've seen this. Some of you may already have it, so I'm sorry you're hearing this for probably the umpteenth time, but that is a critical piece, because you can stop them in their tracks, the cyber criminals, if you have multi-factor authentication. It's not a complete panacea, but it is very, very useful.
So there's one nugget you've already gotten, multi-authentication. One nugget we've already gotten from this program.
Well, the second nugget, hold on. There's two here. We're gonna have multiple nuggets.
You get as many nuggets as
verbal confirmation. Verbal confirmation of wire transfers or any amount over, let's say, $5,000. Okay, no matter who it's to or from. If it's not a known accounts payable issue and not already in the system, and it looks in any way strange or coming from one of your partners or one of your associates or one of your legal assistants, there has to be verbal confirmation. That will also protect you. So that's the second nugget.
A lot of nuggets. You guys have the nuggets. This is good stuff. And you said you probably have heard it a million times, Kevin, a minute ago, but we need to hear it a million times. Repetition, it sinks in, and we get the message. And plus, the risk keeps changing. Everything is changing. There may be a new threat tomorrow. So we have to be smart. I'm moving us along here to phase 3. We're aware of the risk, and it looks like our audience is aware. we have to be ready, and we've heard some tips for readiness and to increasing the readiness of our law firm, and we have to be smart. A lot of this is common sense. A lot of it is very, very technical. And that's why we're so happy to have Kevin and Jamey here. What do you say to a solo or small lawyer? You mentioned the brother-in-law or in-law as the IT tech. That's probably the case in a lot of solo and small firms. What's your advice to them, where the son-in-law or is the IT guy? Anything different or?
Well, I think.
Go ahead, Jamey.
Well, I think that obviously there is some differences there, and there could be some different risks for a smaller firm, depending upon what type of business that you're having. But one thing that we've seen that's been successful is that even if you are going to save costs and have your brother-in-law be the IT or one of the partners at your firm who knows a little bit about computers be your IT, one service that some of these major forensics companies offers, and even some other IT firms offer, is what they call penetration testing. And at the beginning of every year, maybe once a year, once every 6 months, for as little as $1,000 at the most up to about $5,000, depending upon how robust your computer system is, you can have these IT firms come in and actually basically tell you where you're vulnerable. They can actually try certain types of hack schemes and things like that to actually tell you what you need to do to close the holes, is the best way to put it. And even just that basic yearly maintenance. You think about your car that you take in every year, every 6 months or whatever it may be. Just annual maintenance on your IT from an outside source can be very helpful. Again, it's called penetration testing, but if you called up any local IT company that knows how to do it, depending on the size of your system, it's not a very expensive option when you consider what the ramifications would be of not being prepared.
So penetration testing, it's not going to break your budget. Once a year or so, I think I heard you say. Plus, I think I saw a Sylvester Stallone movie where basically he was a penetration tester. He would go into jails, though, I think.
Yeah, there you go.
And identify weaknesses. Same concept.
Yeah, you want to lock it down.
Yeah, you want to know where you're weak. We're in the smart section now, and I like this graphic of the kid genius because it occurs to me, I'm an old timer. Is there a generational sort of aspect to cybersecurity, or some lawyers maybe? So it's everybody.
No, not at all. You see it some of the old timers like myself and others might just not be familiar with some of these terms and so forth, and maybe the millennials are. But the thing about the millennials and younger is that they're used to sharing their information with everybody, okay? And they have a certain trust of the internet that I certainly don't have. And so they're just as vulnerable. Your age of your employees will not matter for the steps that you need to take relating to a cyber policy, checking in on your IT person, penetration testing, and instituting just some of these basic things that you can do to protect yourself. When I mentioned that multi-factor authentication, I had, when it was recommended at our firm many years ago, I fought it kicking and screaming because it was just such a pain in the backside to be called on my cell phone every time I logged in from some other device or from a new Wi-Fi in a hotel or whatever. But it works. And the reason that we suggest it is because it works and it eliminates a whole array of problems that you may have. So that's just one idea, and why is this so critical? But a response plan, an incident response plan, is also pretty critical.
Yeah, let me interrupt you here. Just because we started the poll, looks like 68% say they do not have an incident response plan. I'm going to ask both of you guys to talk a little bit more about what we mean by that in a second. But Jamey, when you were talking about a plan or a policy earlier on cyber privacy, that would be for the firm, right? On here are the controls, here are the protocols we use to avoid disclosure or breach. And an incident response plan sounds to me like something that happens when disaster strikes, when there is a problem.
100%. So the policy that you're talking about, the firm-wide policy would be pre-breach. How do we prevent the breach? The response plan is what happens when there is a breach, or when you notice that you're having a cyber event. We'll talk about this in the last section, but a cyber insurance policy, depending upon how it works, is an incident response plan in itself. The way that some are set up becomes an incident response plan. But
I'm sorry I interrupted you, but I thought I'm just going to go ahead and put the number 4 slide up since you talked about cyber. It is an incident response plan. So that will be our 4th section.
Just real quick, before we get there though, yes, the insurance can be, we already have developed incident response plan for every single type of risk. Okay, so whatever bucket a risk falls into, we have a response plan for it. Having said that, it is useful to have at least a discussion with the leaders of the firm as to, well, what would we do, right? What would we do in the event of our system being locked down, right? Now, setting aside COVID-19 and our particular vulnerability right now, what other method could you continue in operation? That's pretty useful, right? To have the discussion amongst partners or amongst the lawyers if we were to have ransomware, if we were going to have a wire transfer problem, or if one of our emails gets hacked. What is our response plan? And just having that discussion at all is useful. But Jamey, we do have some examples that we could share offline with incident response plans. And
so this is something you guys work with lawyers on, developing plans and
yes, every day.
Sure.
Sure.
I mean, we have to talk about, it's educating your staff as well. When something comes up, who's going to be notified? If you click on the bad link and then your computer becomes wonky all of a sudden or slow, you just go on about your work as daily business. Everyone should know who has to be notified, who's going to be on the response team. For certain things, are you going to immediately tell your third-party IT? Are you immediately going to take a computer offline? Those types of things. And then also you're thinking about your business, right? So just because, at our firm, just because we can't access our email, or just because we can't access our electronic files, doesn't mean we still can't work. And so these things have to be communicated and understood in advance, because I always talk about the timing, the first 30 minutes of a breach, the first 3 hours of a breach, and the first 3 days of a breach. If you have ideas and plans in place in those time periods, that can not only shorten the time of interruption, but it can also, in those time periods, really affect how well you come out of it at the end. Some of the biggest mistakes is waiting to take action, or not having something ready in place before it happens.
Great point. And I was reminded of something Kevin said when we were preparing for this program, when he said a solo lawyer, perhaps who has a busy practice, or a traffic lawyer, might want to ask themselves, how long could I go if I don't have access to my court files, if I don't have my client files? How long could I survive, or my financial information, if you were subject to some sort of attack and your data is locked up? So that's a good question to be asking. How can I operate if I can't get this stuff?
Well, it didn't. 10 years ago, it wasn't that big a deal. We were still, most county courts were still on a paper system. We would, physically go file things. Even Cook County, Illinois, where I do a lot of practice, was still set up that even as of a couple of years ago. I used to rail, and I'm sure many of you on the listening to this used to get upset with the dehumanizing nature of our transfer to this electronic practice. Everything, it seems, filters into my email box now, to where it's you used to get a piece of mail, or you get some other things at FedEx's and whatever. But we've gone completely where everything dumps into your email box, and that's the vulnerability that cyber criminals have spotted and are attacking, because now our legal practice is so highly dependent. And the way when Jamey was talking about the cyber insurance being a response plan, it's a response plan in multiple ways. They've already taken the time and effort with us and others to have response teams. Okay, so a cyber coach that immediately answers the phone. We have a 1-800 number that can be called upon your first notice. We also obviously email as well that can get to us. And we're around, and AltaPro and others are around 24/7 to answer that call. we have established protocols already on what to do. So if there's a wire transfer, we know who to call and how to try to stop it. That's a big deal in the first 3 days.
That's a huge deal. A huge deal.
If there's a ransomware attack, we know the person that could go into your system, determine what level it is. How bad is it? Can it be stopped in its tracks at this point before the entire system is encrypted? We also have the capabilities to go into your system remotely and determine if your backup can be put on board online. This is all useful stuff. And it's already set up because we've spent, again, the last 15 years and like over 1,000 incidents developing this ability to do this with folks like UltraPro. And then obviously you've got the coverage for if there's an actual loss, business interruption, and all these things. Jamey, would you like to address some of the other things that come with being safe? It's really just transferring some of this risk because many of us just don't understand it that well, right? Many lawyers, they're busy being lawyers, not busy being IT people and fixing their systems. And so this is just another instance of transferring some of this risk to someone else.
Right. And Jamey, before you start, we have some audience questions. We can get some questions if we on the issue of safety, gauge their own level of safety. So those might pop up as you're talking about.
Oh, I see. I see them. Yep.
I'm not really seeing those, but.
Well, I could read some of these. Can a cyber criminal break into your computer network simply by you being connected to the internet? In other words, if you do not click on links, do not download files, do not answer questionable emails, can a cyber criminal still get into your system and lock your data? I'm not aware of a cyber criminal having the ability just through your login, unless they've already broken into your computer. In other words, if they've already broken into your computer and you are remotely logging in, the way it would really work is that they would wait for you to put in your credentials, record that, and then log in separately. But that is, it's unlikely that the scenario you say in that question is going to occur, but it is possible to do it by just not having a direct hack of your system.
There's a greater chance if it's an unsecured Wi-Fi network. So, I mean, obviously if you're at a coffee shop remoting into your law firm system, you want to see if the Wi-Fi is secured because, you know, on our remote access for our firm, sometimes it won't, if I'm in a place where it doesn't like the Wi-Fi connection, it won't let me remote in. So those are certain times where that can occur. But again, a good safe remote access system can prevent it.
This question also gets at, or we ask our audience about staff training. We've talked about that a little bit, but looks like it's split 50-50 on how well they feel their staff is trained, specifically to identify social engineering, but we can talk more in general just on being cyber vigilant. It's so important that everybody buys in. It can't just be the lawyer who comes to this webinar. Everybody from the mail clerk to the top partner, right, has to buy into this.
Oh, of course. I mean, because every person in the organization that has a login is a vulnerability. It is what it is. I mean, you're not going to prevent that by, you know, in any way other than education. And so if you're so, like I see a lot of the questions are saying, well, how does this apply to me as a solo practitioner with one assistant maybe, or maybe you have a part-timer that helps you. I mean, that's just the education of yourself and that assistant. That's as simple as that. Attending this webinar is one of the things you're doing to increase your knowledge and increase your awareness so that you can be safe out there using, taking in documents and dealing with people through email and the internet. If you're a larger firm, you know, with staff and various finance people and all sorts of other different functions, HR, every single one of them has to be aware of cyber protection and what not to do and what to do. And that's where the policy really comes into play.
Right, and that question about smaller firms, and you know, I understand that Kevin and I deal with breaches that are geared towards smaller firms more than larger firms. We even deal with programs that are 1 to 5 lawyers. And one thing to think about is when we talk about the wire transfers, think of the biggest law firm you can. You know, if they wired out $150,000, it would not be fun, but they could, you know, it would be a blip on their radar. But if a solo practitioner who's handling a real estate transaction is holding the buyer's funds and wires out $150,000, that can either destroy your income for a year or it could destroy your business. So all of these things that we're talking about are extremely important for smaller firms.
Mm-hmm.
Right, right.
Even if you're a solo practitioner, I mean, one question I thought was a good one is, hey, I'm a solo practitioner. Do I really need a written cyber policy? For practical purposes, probably not, but you should be aware of them and read them. If you want to use it for sort of a defense, if you do get broken into, listen, I had a written policy, that is useful, because what we're going to start to see as this becomes more prevalent is the bar associations and the attorney disciplinary organizations start to look at law firms with a more, I guess, closer eye and a closer look as to what they're doing for cybersecurity. It'd be the same as if you didn't have locks on your office door. I think the bar could probably take disciplinary action against you for not having a lock or allowing strangers to walk through your offices and look at documents whenever they feel like it. It's no different. I think that the bar associations and whatnot have been slow to get to that because, quite frankly, it's new to a lot of people. 10 years is not a long time to really be fully aware and to see the kind of crime that we're seeing and also the breaches of law firms. But as time goes on, that is going to be a bigger deal. But again, solo practitioner to a large firm, in a lot of ways, the number one thing you can do, other than to be smart in some of the ideas we're talking about, is actually get cyber insurance.
Kevin,
I'm not gonna lie, it's the easiest thing to do.
Kevin,
let me do anything else, and you don't want to, go through all these jump through all these hoops and do all these extra things. At least have some protection for yourself, because the way I look at cyber policies now is the best analogy I can give you is that it's like a homeowner's policy for your network, right? There's first party liability, which is the vast majority of what we're talking about, right? If you know anything about insurance policies, the first party is something that happens to you and the damages occur to you, whether it's paying ransomware or the damage to your network, because a lot of times the networks are damaged, or to get documents back in form, to scan your disks, to do all that, remedy the situation. That's first party. Then there's third party liability that these policies also cover. So this is different than what you look at with your E&O policy, where you're really talking about third party liability. But the cyber policy also allows for third-party liability if your client's information is breached, or if you cause damage to someone else by, say, wiring money off or doing something like that. Again, it's and also like a homeowner's policy, a lot of these policies will have a phone number you can call, right? Not just a website you can go to and read policies and all that, but someone you can talk to that day. I mean, if you look at it from a homeowner's perspective, if a tree falls on your house, you don't want to go to a website and learn about how to take a tree off your house. You want to talk to a live person who's ready to jump on it for you and to start solving your problems, right? To call the contractors in that are necessary, to bring the resources to bear to stop the problem, and then to remedy the problem. And that's what the insurers have all put together. They've taken the time and effort to do it, just like the homeowners insurers have done. In this case, they've done it for cyber.
That's great. And we might can circle back to the cyber insurance piece later. It strikes me that cyber insurance sort of bookends. We talked about the claims. What are the problems out there? You want the sort of coverage that addresses those claims and those risks. So those are nice bookends. But I want to get to at least one question here. Our audience has been asking some questions. Kevin or Jamey, this comes from Terrence Kennedy. Don't know where Terrence is from. We got him from all over. Strong showing in Iowa. Go Hawkeyes. A lot from Iowa. Terrence says, what is the value of Norton Pro Security software and similar protection and automatic backups, for example, by Comcast? Either one of you guys.
I mean, one of the issues we went through is that keeping up your malware and computer protection software. Keeping that up is extremely important. And we're talking back into cyber insurance. It's part of a requirement of cyber insurance that you actually do that. And again, that can be when we talked about the yearly penetration testing. Those companies can tell you if your antivirus and if those other programs are doing enough for you, if there's something else you should be doing. But extremely important. I mean, obviously, don't let those subscriptions lapse. That's what those companies are there for, is that they prevent some of the basic type attacks, and they're extremely important.
Got it.
Oh, yeah, no, to answer your question, what's the value? The value is super high. And so everyone, I guess it'd be the third nugget, and I guess it was just sort of obvious, but I'm glad you raised it, Terrence, is that having a separate, whether it's be McAfee or whether it's Norton, there's a whole bunch of others. And as long as you're getting a brand name that's been known in the industry, and we have a list of those that you can reference, you're going to be much more protected otherwise. Now, in terms of your question with automatic backups through Comcast, it's hard to say. I presume the backups from Comcast will be legitimate, and you could separately deal with those. And they're not going to have the kind of encryption that's going to allow to go back through to Comcast. Where we see the backups becoming a problem is where they're directly tied. So it's just your own backup. You're just backing up straight to another hard drive, right? But if you're going to an outside source into the cloud for your backups, obviously you've got some levels of protection there that you otherwise wouldn't have.
And is Pam Allen, our CEO, I think she wanted maybe to weigh in on that question. Not sure if I need to do anything to get her live here. I do have another question. This is from Heather Toole. Does regular malpractice policy cover cyber attacks and related issues? So if I have my regular LPL policy, what does it cover? Do I even need to worry about this cyber stuff?
That's a funny question, because about 15 or 20 years ago, I was sitting with my insurance broker for my E&O insurance. And I said, hey, could you call your staff and find out that if I was hacked today, is my E&O coverage going to cover it? And the first text I got back was, yes, of course. And then I got, well, hold on, we're checking. Then it was maybe, and then it was a flat out no. So there are many cyber attacks that would, so for instance, the first party liability, all these costs to fix your system, to get rid of the problem, to get your backup working if that's the situation, or to replace money that was lost of yours, okay, would not be covered by a malpractice policy. It's only on the third party side that there might, and I say might now because it depends on your E&O policy, that there might be some overlap. Jamey, would you like to comment?
Yeah, it was a good synopsis of it, but right. I mean, there are times when your LPL policy and a cyber policy would work together, but unless you have some sort of special endorsement for cyber on your LPL policy, the main focus is that first party loss, and it's something that we don't always think about. But the cost of hiring privacy counsel that specializes in cyber attacks, the cost of hiring forensic ITs, the cost of hiring notification, the cost of credit monitoring, the cost of replacing funds that were stolen from your firm or that you wired out, all those things would not be covered by your LPL policy. That's why cyber liability for law firms works together with your LPL policy, but that's only in the third party setting. So any of these first party risks we've talked about would not be covered by a traditional legal malpractice or E&O policy.
Well, thank you for that. We could dive as deep into this as we had time for, but our time today is out. Thank you so much, Kevin O'Hagan, Jamey Davidson, for joining us. Mostly thanks to you, our participants. Remember, you will need to complete the post-webinar survey to receive your CLE credit. It should pop open automatically in your browser as we end the presentation, but you can complete it anytime by visiting the link on the website. A link is also found in the post-attendee email that we'll be sending to you. Remember to enter code 1 is ALTA, A-L-T-A, all caps, and code number 2 is PRO, P-R-O, to get your CLE credit. Thanks so much for being here. Join us next time for ALTA Pro Live, and thanks again to our expert guests.
Thank you
So much for having us. Appreciate it.
Take care.